versus you. It's you 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 versus you. Time to clear your mental, everything you've been through. Looking in the mirror like you're the one with the issues. You against yourself, feel like you against the world. Internally battling all of the trauma, you struggle to manage it. Gotta seek help for the damages. It's you versus you, now go and handle it. It's you versus you, let's get ahead of it. It's you versus you, let's clear our heads of it. I'm so good now, I feel good now. The baggage put down, just let me live. Just let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.
Hey, yo, peace, everybody. I'm Saquon. I'd like to welcome you all back to a fresh episode of the You versus You podcast. Today, we're going to talk about boundaries. And by definition, a boundary is a demarcation, it's a conceptualized limit that defines what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our relationships, which is very important when we talk about our spheres of influence or our circles of five, because all parties involved in order for a healthy relationship to occur have to be willing participants. So it's very, very, very important how we shape and curate our spheres of influence. And again, a prerequisite of that is going to be our forming, our enforcing of boundaries, right? Because those are ultimately for the protection and the nurturing of all the relationships that carry us throughout our lives. So I'm excited to have this conversation because I got this young brother that I met in the gym. Known him for a little bit over a year now. He's a real kindred spirit. Always has something good to say. His energy is always upbeat. And that's an amazing thing because we actually work out very early in the morning, 5:30, 5:45. And this brother is always on it. Like, yo, what's up, OG? How you feeling? Always giving me that positive energy, man. So I'm really, really, really excited to dive into this conversation about this very important topic with this young brother, Mr. Debrion Radford. What's up, champ?
What's up, boss?
How you feeling?
I'm good, man. How you?
I'm good, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to
Mm.
welcome you to the show. So tell us about yourself, man. What you do for a living?
Okay, so I'm a logistics engineer at Lockheed Martin, aerospace industry. I've been there for a while. Kind of started, in the military and then transitioned to the civilian world. So, um, outside of that, though, I'm actually pursuing, a mental health counseling degree, my master's degree actually, from
Dope.
Liberty University, man, to kind of, to help brothers like me, man, that at a young age. So when they do grow up, you know, they can um they can actually communicate more effectively to the people around them. And so, it's just a little bit about what I'm doing these days.
Yeah, I think that's super dope because I shared with you and I ultimately shared with the viewership on several occasions, man. What got me into this podcast space surrounding or, shrouded around mental health is the fact that when I was pursuing it, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. I had those stipulations. I wanted to talk to a black man, but preferably older, right?
Yeah.
And not saying that they didn't exist, but in the time that I was looking for, I couldn't find that. So I wanted to create an anecdotal platform so that brothers who think that mental health is taboo, they can hopefully look at this, glean enough inspiration to be like, yo, you know what? Let me go have a 15-minute consultation and actually see if therapy is for me as opposed to taking the predisposed defensive stance and just saying that, yo, this ain't for me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So boundaries, man. We talked a few weeks ago and when I tapped you for this, and I was like, yo, in talking, I think this would be a dope conversation to have with this young brother. And you explained to me that, relationships are at risk without the healthy enforcement of boundaries.
Yeah.
And I believe in that wholeheartedly, man. So tell us a little bit about that or why you feel that way.
Well, I think looking back, you know, my life and my journey, how I got to this point, um, with boundaries, like with my wife, me communicating with her, me communicating with like women around me. I just kind of felt like, man, like, what am I doing like wrong? You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Like, what am I like? How am I communicating to my wife where she's not being this? I feel like she wasn't really being like acceptable to what I was saying, right? And so like really like digging deep and you know what I'm saying, like with um my childhood, kind of going back and saying, hey, like, my mom, like what was our relationship, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous,
yeah,
man.
you
I'm
you're good.
kind
No,
of
it's a safe space first
yeah,
and
I'm kind of
foremost, right?
nervous, bro. So
You're good, man.
yeah, but
Take your time.
yeah, so just me communicating with my mom, um, about like, boundaries, about, hey, like, why do you, oh man, let me take a break, bro. I can't. I'm kind of nervous, bro. Uh, this is,
It's all good. Yeah, take that break, man, because it's interesting, right? Like what I do for a living, like in my 9 to 5. I had a mentor, still have a mentor, right?
yeah.
And when I first started, he has a underlined tag on his emails. And when I first read it, it was always interesting to me, right? And it
Yeah.
says, unspoken expectations are the breeding grounds for resentment, right?
Hmm.
And that definitely is applicable to the healthy establishment of boundaries, right? Because when I would ask myself, well, what does that mean? Unspoken expectations are the breeding grounds for resentment. Simply put, if I don't clearly express to you what my expectations are, whether it's a working relationship, whether it's a platonic relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, and vice versa, mind you, right? If I don't express to you what those expectations are, then I can't hold you accountable for not adhering to them. And vice versa. Like you can't hold me accountable for not adhering to expectations if you don't make it clear what those expectations are. And then what you were just saying, it's very important. I had to learn this in my journey as well. How I communicate or convey those expectations.
Yeah.
Number one, make sure that it's done in a palatable and healthy way, right? But
Hmm.
also of equal importance, make sure that that's done proactively as opposed to reactively, right? Like not let something happen and then lash out, right? And say, well, and I never expressed to you what those expectations were to begin with. I think it's setting myself up for failure. It's setting my partner up for failure. It's setting up in any relationship, right? That other person or people, it's setting them up for failure. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It does set them up for failure. And going back to, like my mom and my wife, like if we don't have like certain boundaries, if I don't say, hey, like this is what I'm feeling and these are my emotions and like this is what I want or what I don't want, then I feel like, it kind of lets people make their own judgment of how to treat you, right? Instead of you saying, hey, like I'm laying this boundary out, I'm laying these expectations out, you follow them, or like we got to have a conversation and like we're gonna address the issues. Hey, like I seen that like, or I seen that you did this and I pretty much told you not to do that and you went against, like a boundary there.
Absolutely.
So those conversations are, they need to be had, I guess, way before like you establish a relationship too, though. But again, you going back to the mom thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the mom thing is like one of those things where I will speak from my experience.
Okay.
Um, my mom, she, was hey, she's still a woman of like, hey, like, do what I say, you know what I'm saying, and don't question it. Um, and what that led to is like her kind of dictating my life, right? And then it kind of spiraled into like, okay, as time went on, as I got older, I kind of let people kind of dictate my life,
Mm,
right? Like in a way where I didn't have a boundary, so I'm kind of letting, you know, whether it's my friends or my wife kind of dictate what was good for me and me not establishing something, you know what I'm saying, for myself. So, I think, like that kind of play, like me and my mom's relationship or how she kind of treated me, um, really played the impact on my journey into adulthood.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to peel that onion back a little bit more. But prior to doing that, I just want to reiterate again, setting boundaries is for the protection and nurturing of relationships, right? Because, conveying what those expectations are, and it has to be vice versa. Because, I had relationships in the past like, yo, this is what I want. This is how it has to be. Number one, it was just conveyed in an unhealthy, in a narcissistic, and dare say in some situations, monstrous way, right?
Yeah.
So that was one thing, right? And then it was like, okay, well, me laying down all these lines, but then the vice versa aspect, right?
Hmm.
Not giving my partner or other people in that relationship the same courtesy of establishing what their boundaries are and what their expectations were, right? So I expressed this in an unhealthy way, didn't give them the opportunity to express what their expectations were, and didn't give them the opportunity to sit with. That's why I said proactive versus reactive, because I'm expressing to you what my expectations are, but you may not be in a space to where you're able to adhere to them.
Yeah.
You may not
Yeah.
want to adhere to them,
Yeah.
right? But again, establishing that proactively, like let's just take a romantic relationship involved, for example, right? We need to do this before, we get to the loving and spending all of that time and the habit formation, right?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the waters get murky after that.
Yeah.
Whereas it would have been much easier to lay down that critical foundation prior to all of that, because maybe you may not be able to adhere and vice versa. Maybe I may not be able to adhere.
Yeah.
But before all that crap gets involved, it's easier for us to walk away amicably in a friendly kind of way. You feel me?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you were saying, talking about the mom, it's a little different, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't necessarily walk away from that situation,
Yeah.
which is a perfect segue because you said that it was hard to say no to some people. And then, like you said, you carried that into adulthood, and this created a level of resentment. So I'd like for you to
Hmm.
talk about
Yeah. I think so. When we talk about the level of resentment, I think my mom had an expectation of me to be this certain type of guy, right?
that.
So like whenever like, like we talk about like moms and sons, I think a lot of times, especially like when a mom has gone through relationships after relationships and the guy isn't really like the guy that they intended to be with. I think when they have sons, they kind of mold their sons into this ideal guy. And I think that's what happened to me. Like I think my mom, or I know my mom laid an expectation out for me to be this ideal guy. Like, hey, like you will respect your woman, and then all these are good things. Don't get me wrong, but I had no. There was no error for me to mess up. So I always had to walk this straight line whenever like with me meeting women, with me, what I'm saying, like um, you know, I, interacting with women or interacting with women in my life, or interacting with like my siblings or my cousins. I always had to walk the straight line. I could not get like I feel like I couldn't get mad or like I couldn't like lash out or I couldn't like really express my feelings. I always had to be this stand up guy. Again, it's good, but there was no grace for me in that point in that moment. And so like it drew me to a level of resentment to be like, well, the guys that you're dating, mom, you aren't holding them to a standard, but you're holding me to this highest standard, right? They can treat you any kind of way, and I'm not saying that I'm not gonna that I would treat my mom any kind of way, but there was no grace for me. So that drew me to a level of resentment, and I think too, like just being married, it kind of it damaged me a little bit, like just relationships in general, but like being married just kind of I think it damaged me in a way to say, okay, like now I got to walk this straight line. Like now I can't feel the way I need to feel. I can't say certain things. Um, yeah, I think that really drew me to a level of resentment for sure.
And it's interesting because when you expressed that before, because you've undergone therapy, right? And
Yeah,
presently in therapy and all
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And you told me that your therapist defined what an outward approach was, right? When
yeah,
someone does not adhere to your expectation, which is ultimately a lashing out.
yeah.
But you said that yours was the complete opposite. So your level of resentment forced you to have an inward approach where you sort of internalized these things and held those things in, right?
Yep. And I gave in. I gave in to the concept of what they wanted me to do. Um, which is kind of like codependency, right? Like
That's exactly what it
you
is.
want people to be happy, you know what I'm saying? So you're like, I don't want to like make you mad, or I don't want to like I don't like confrontation, right? And so like in order for me to like avoid confrontation, I'm gonna just give in to what you're wanting me to do. And
Right.
that's exactly how I lived my life, right? I wasn't able to express like, oh, like I don't like that in a healthier way, right? It was more like either you're gonna fight it out or like you're not gonna you just gonna kind of give in. And I'm not gonna fight a woman. So
Right.
it's like let me just kind of give in to the concept of what they want, like happy wife, happy life type deal, right? And that's just how I treated all the women in my life, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just feel like I just didn't have a voice to express how I felt, about certain things that they were doing. But again, when we talk about boundaries, I didn't set that boundary, so they were able to do whatever they wanted until I established a boundary with them.
I think it's amazing for you to be able to express that as clearly, as descriptively as you're able to now. And I think it's an indication of your level of commitment to your work that you've been undergoing. I think that's amazing. And I also think that you hit the nail right on the head. And a lot of us brothers go through that in our situation, right? So what happens is we're unable to express those things, and it does produce a level of codependency, right? And it also introduces a people pleasing
Yeah.
component, and it's exacerbated or reinforced by the people, whether it's blatant or inadvertently,
Hmm.
because we play what's called the blame game.
Yeah.
And blame is an acronym, right? So blame, BLAME. So whenever situations pop up, right? So you express something to me, right?
Hmm.
And I'll blame. So I'll shift the blame of the occurrence, even if it's on me. I'll shift it to somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'll even shift it on you, right?
Hmm.
And then when the blaming aspect doesn't work, then the L is incorporated. See, I'll lie. You understand what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay.
I'll lie to you. I'll lie to myself. I'll lie to others.
Hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? And then when I'm unable to lie, right, because that sting of whatever truth is so great, then the A is incorporated. So then I'll avoid it. So I'll try to shake it like I'm in a boxing match. So you
Yeah.
hitting me with this thing, I'm trying to avoid it, right?
Hmm.
But if that sting is too much for me to avoid and it does hit me, right? I can't blame anymore. I can't lie anymore. I can't avoid anymore. Then I am. I minimize it. Oh, you bugging. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that deep. Well, I did this because of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the E, making excuses. And when you become a victim of that, this formulates what's called your PSI in your sphere of influence. And your PSI is what's called the perceived social identity, right? So when you say codependency, right?
Hmm.
When you say people pleasing,
Yeah.
when you express the inability at a young age to express how you feel, see, this formulated your perceived social identity, how you perceive yourself,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And like you just said a moment ago, this affects all the relationships, the subsequent relationships with women, yes. But if you really peel that onion back, you'll see how it affected relationships with everyone in your life prior to being able to address those things,
Hmm.
right? What are your thoughts on
No, I agree with you. So I think my relationships, especially like with my dad, um, now that I'm thinking about it, um, really really played an impact on my life too. Um, Not just with women, but yeah, like I think I didn't trust men, right? Like, cause I guess a little bit backstory on
that? Absolutely.
my childhood. But I grew up in a domestic violence home, like, and it wasn't my dad. My dad actually, he, went to prison when I was 2 years old. So it was my brother. My mom decided, hey, I'm moving on from this relationship, and she got married to my younger brother's dad, right? Um, and it was the domestic violence relationship, and like I ended up moving with my granddad. I think that's the only guy that I trusted at the time, right? Um, but I ended up moving with my granddad and my grandmother. And that relationship was great. Like they kind of showed me, what parenthood was, and like they just took care of me. And then I moved back with my mom and my stepdad at the time. But things kind of got worse, and I think that really, I would say, is exaggerated like the way I thought about men when I started living in my parents' home, or my mom's home with her husband at the time. I started seeing, like, I was like, man, all like men like this besides my grandfather, and even if my grandfather was like that, he didn't display that to me.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, I think those relationships though, like, play a big part in how we see ourselves, how we see other people around us. Um, yeah, I think you're spot on with the blame though. That acronym. So
So check it out. I want to ask you, I want to walk it back. But before we walk it back, I want to ask you because, like you said something that was so profound. You said that, I would see these interactions with men, right? And then you
mhm,
would ask yourself, are all men like this outside of my grandfather? But when you look in the mirror, you see a young man,
yeah.
right? So what type of confusion was this creating in you as you were growing? Or have you even gotten there to unpack that?
Yeah, I think, like, for me personally, it was confusing because, again, like I said, I think my mom wanted me to be a certain man. Like, as I continue, like, to walk my life, right, or live my life, I started realizing, like, man, like my mom had an expectation on me, right? Like, of me being this certain type of guy.
Right,
And it wasn't like she was like, hey, like, I just want you to just do you. It was more like, hey, like, I want you to be this perfect guy. I want you to be the opposite of what my ex-husband was, right? But then when I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I think I am him. Just based on I would say, based on when you living with somebody for so long, you kind of like inherit, like, you start to pick up their behaviors and their patterns, and you don't want to be like them so bad. Like, I'm like, man, I'm not gonna be like him. But then, like, as time went on, I'm like, maybe I should. Maybe like maybe I do have like some behaviors that point me towards that direction. And like as time went on, I did, right?
Right.
That's why I, ultimately I go to counseling. Because I did pick up some behaviors from that marriage, right? Also picking up some good behaviors from my grandfather,
Right.
right? Like as I guess as a father, but I never really like seen him in a good light of a husband, like my grandfather I'm talking about. I never really seen him as in a good light as a husband, right? Like I don't think he communicated with my grandmother too often. I think like apparently he was cheating on her every year or whatever. So I don't know, man. It's one of those things though where like I think I had all of these like traits that these men in my life had that women didn't like. And I was like trying to be this perfect guy because my mom told me to be this perfect guy. But in a nutshell, I think I was both. I think I was not this good husband or good boyfriend or good guy. But I also think I was to a certain extent because of what my mom expected of me, right? But I never really gained the understanding of what do I expect for myself. And so I had to that was a long road to kind of figure out, okay, like Abraham, like what do you expect for yourself as a man? Like how do you identify or what's your definition of a man? Like let's start there. So I just kind of like really went through this process of like who do you want to be like, you know, who do you want to be like? What do you want to be? And go from there. And so, but it's been a long journey. I'm still doing it now. Like your past and your experiences kind of shape you for who you are. But I'm still doing it now to this day. So I'm still looking myself in the mirror in a nutshell.
That's a beautiful thing, man. Yeah, that self-actualization process is an ever-going process, right? And you're right. So these series of they're these behaviors, right? Like they're learned behaviors, right? Like this organ is a fascinating organ, right? The brain, and it has an hemispheric structure, right? So you have a right hemisphere, you have a left hemisphere, right? And your left hemisphere is going to be responsible in your development, like your speech, so on, and a whole bunch of other things. But as it
Hmm.
pertains to what we're talking about, the right side of the hemisphere is like your spatial reasoning, right? Pattern recognition, so on and so forth, like how you read maps, how you orient yourself in space,
Yeah.
which is very important because, like, as a kid, right? And we can't, as a baby, toddler, young, you can't speak, right? So you're learning how to orient yourself in your relationships through these pattern recognitions, right?
Hmm.
So a baby can identify what a frown is, right? What a happy face is, so on and so forth, right? And that development grows as we grow. So we're looking at behaviors, right?
Yeah.
And we're learning these things, right?
Yeah.
And they're becoming, you know, then we have memories, right? And we have two types of memories. Like we have explicit memories, like which are conscious memories, things that we can recall
Hmm.
immediately, right? So they're fresh in our recallability, if you will, right? And then we have implicit memories, which are unconscious memories or patterns or learned behaviors, things that we've learned, that we've experienced, that we have no recollection of, that rear their ugly faces when we become triggered, right? So yeah, so that whole series of learned behaviors, and then what we see is as we grow into adolescence and adulthood, like you said, that period of self-actualization is so important because prior to that, we realize, like you just said, we're not our own individuals. We're just comprised of fragmented thoughts, beliefs, and ideologies of other people.
Yeah.
Keyword fragmented, right?
Yeah.
So we're not even our full selves yet, right? So that's very important. But I want to walk it back a bit. Talk to me about your military experience because you were in the military, right?
Yeah. Um. So I joined the military in 2016. So right after I graduated college. I was kind of at a crossroads. So me and my now wife, we been together since we were in high school, and then we had a breakup, and so I was at a crossroads because I'm like, man, what do I do? You know, I had just like lost my job, lost a relationship. I was in therapy. It was like one of the greatest. I'm not gonna lie, it was one of the greatest like times of my life because I was in therapy. I was getting to know myself. And I think that's what I needed. And so I'm like, let me just join the military. I think this will give me some kind of structure because I don't know what structure is. Let me go join the military, give me some structure, and then like figure life out from there. So I went to the military in 2016, Air Force. Taught me so much, but the military actually taught me how to compartmentalize things.
Mm. How so?
Um, so let's just say, for instance, I'm having a bad day or like I'm feeling like down. Um, I would go to work. People ask me how I'm doing. I'm good. You know, like I wasn't able to feel those things until I got out of uniform, right? And so that kind of bled into my real life, you know. And hey, like I wasn't able to really empathize with individuals. It they just taught me to kind of be numb to what's in front of you. Like if somebody were to, die in front of you, you just got to keep moving, right? Like you don't have time to like cry, you don't have time to feel. Hey, like you got to get out of the line of fire, get somewhere safe, and go on with your life. And so again, like it just bled into, my life. Like I wasn't empathetic, I wasn't sympathetic. I was like I would look at somebody cry and be like, "Are you done crying yet?" Like, and then move on with life. But that's not reality. Like,
Yes.
it's not reality, right? Like, my aunt actually passed away when I was deployed in 2021, and I walked into my office and told my sergeant about what's going on. He was like, "All right, like go." Have a rest day and we'll see tomorrow. It was like no empathy for me. Like it was like, hey, if you want to go see a counselor, you better go now. We need you to work tomorrow. We need you at work tomorrow. And so like I was able to like I wasn't really able to cope or wasn't really able to kind of like really sit down and say, okay, like this is how I'm feeling about my aunt, right? This is how I'm feeling about what just transpired. I cried, I went to see a chaplain. I was at work a few hours later, and like nothing happened. So the military taught me to kind of like compartmentalize everything and put everything in its boxes. And then as time goes on, if you want to unlock the box and you want to deal with that, then cool, you can deal with it. But you put everything in in boxes, you hide it, and you keep it moving. And so again, like I said, that just kind of bled into my reality of how I treated relationships, how I treated people, how I treated situations, um, so that I didn't have to like really sit with my feelings and be vulnerable.
Right.
Um, so yeah, like that's my military experience, man, and how like it kind of shaped a little bit of me.
Interesting. I think it shaped a lot when you factor in what you were talking about earlier, which is very beautiful, I might add, man, because we talked earlier about the codependency. We talked earlier about the people pleasing. We talked earlier about the inward approach that you would take with regard to not expressing yourself, right?
Mhm,
And then fast forward to the military experience where you learn how to compartmentalize. But that compartmentalization was sort of like a repressing of emotion, repressing to the point apathy, right? And a lot of us brothers do that, right?
mhm,
Because number one, we look at therapy, we look at mental health and all that shit. It's bullshit. We look at it as weakness. It's taboo, right? It's not cool to have emotions. right? So we're apathetic. We don't feel, we don't allow ourselves. That's the choice. We don't allow ourselves to feel anything. And this makes us inhuman, right? Uh, but we get to the space, or hopefully on the journey, we get to the space to realize that no, we don't want to be apathetic, right? Like, now don't get me wrong, I don't want my emotions to govern me,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I do want to respect my emotions as what they are. They are indicators, right? And they're tools that are meant to be utilized. You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And like you said, you weren't even able to have apathy expressed to you for something as serious as losing an influential family member, right? And that's just not the. It's not just in the army, right?
Yeah.
That's everywhere within the confines and constructs of our community, especially for us men, and that creates very, very, very scary situations for us.
Hmm.
Because again, within those moments, we still can become triggered. And when we're triggered, we have no idea what's going to happen when we lash out. Like for me, you took an inward approach. I took an inward approach because I would always take an outward approach. And whenever I took an outward approach and I lashed out,
Hmm.
it became a monster. You understand?
Okay.
And I had no control over that monster. I had no control over the expression and or application of my emotions, right? And that left carnage, right? Not necessarily physical, right? But I'm a hell of a speaker. My tongue can lacerate, probably sharper than a Ginsu knife, right? Like I can eviscerate someone with words, right?
Hmm.
And I would do that on several occasions. And the amount of carnage, right? Because these are close interpersonal relationships, right? So prior to the infraction, there's a level of trust,
Hmm.
there's a level of love, there's a level of deference, there's a level of adherence, there's a level of camaraderie, of teammate, right?
Yeah.
And when that trigger would occur, that level of laceration, that level of infraction, the amount of carnage that left. Took a lot of relationships, regardless of the time, all the way back to square one for me, where you have to reestablish trust. You have to reestablish all of those aforementioned things, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that was very scary. So that outward approach. So understanding the fact that I had that capacity and that I feared that capacity, I would take an inward approach, but it was an illusion because it would be an inward only for so long, right? Until it became combustible.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up. Now that I'm thinking about it, the outward approach. I think I took outward approach as time went on. So as I got when I got in the military, or well before I went into the military, um, I think I gave people I was cold. So when you say like, hey, you were just hey, you had a tongue sharper than a knife. I think I didn't talk to anybody. Like if you wrong me, I'm cold, like cold shoulder, and like people will be like, man, why you so cold? I'm like I don't care. Like I just don't give a fuck. Like it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like so like I would leave people with no explanation. Like if you wrong me, that's it. So I think yeah, over time because I was so jaded from having that inward approach, I think I did the opposite. I took a outward approach. Um, and but I do think too, taking the inward approach too much in my situation, it does lead back to taking an outward approach, like literally like lashing out again because you're like, man, I can't take this no more. Like I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. You know, both ways kind of suck. Not gonna lie. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely, it does suck. And in addition to sucking is scary, right? Because we're grown men,
yeah, yeah,
right? So punching you in the face or fucking you up
yeah,
or doing no, that's felony assault,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we have to think that way, all right? So shifting gears a bit. So we have the relationship with the women in your family. Fast forward, we went to the military. Now we're married, right?
yeah,
So then it created an interesting dynamic where you, as a leader of your family, now it's like you have to ask your question: how do I establish a foundation and set boundaries in my personal family? Where in the past you were the emotional support for your moms, aunts, etc.,
yeah,
and how that had created a rift between you and your wife.
yeah. That's a great question, man. We're still unpacking that every day. But I would say so. My wife is very headstrong. She like she grew up in the two-parent household.
Hmm.
Um, and her dad like really set the foundation for it, right? Like, hey, like go to school, like you do your job. Hey, like don't let anybody tell you that you're not this and that, right? Like, I mean, kind of laid it out for her. So, but she's always been like very headstrong. Like nobody's gonna tell me what to do. Um, I would say she was very independent. And so when we got together, coming from where I'm coming from, like I always had women that depended on me. Well, she didn't. So that kind of caused some friction because I'm like, well, it seems like you don't need me. You know what I'm saying? Like my relationships was built off of people needing me. She's like, hey, I just, I want to just love you. Like
Mm.
I want you to, I want to just be there for you, you know. And I just couldn't for the longest time I couldn't understand that concept, right? And so like that caused a level of resentment because I felt like
She toward you or you toward her?
me towards her because I felt like okay, like we're in this relationship, but I feel like I can't give you anything. You know what I'm saying? Like so, like as time went on, like, you know, we talked about things got better. Um and we're still work in progress. Like me and my wife, man, like we both go to counseling, and
Amazing.
we're still talking through like certain situations that we may like communication, right? Communication is one of those things where if she says or if she was to say something and I didn't agree with it, again, that cold shoulder, I can't do that. Right? I can't give her the cold shoulder. So I'm constantly like, okay, like what do you mean by that? Like let's have a conversation about it, and then we got a daughter too. And so like just kind of setting the foundation for our daughter is crucial in these moments. And so, like it's a work in progress, Saquon. Not gonna lie to you, man. But
Yeah.
I think with me and with her doing a lot of groundwork in therapy, we're able to work through a whole lot of things that may have come up in our childhood, and we're able to kind of grow and move forward. So yeah,
I think that's super dope, my man. Um, and that's interesting that you can voice that and understand that. Because yeah, because when she expresses the lack of need of you, which is really a healthy thing, which ultimately, conceptually, theoretically, is a thing that we would want,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But because of your epigenetic influence, your upbringing, your learned behaviors, and most importantly, your PSI. See, this ate at your perceived social identity, right? So, who is Debrion Radford without someone needing me? But more specifically, to tie it directly to the source, without a woman needing me.
yeah, yeah. What'd you say? Savior, what is it called?
The
Like,
Savior's complex.
yeah,
Perfect
man,
segue. I was just about to bring that up.
savior complex, man. I think I developed that over time, right? Like, but I think I developed that not just with women though.
Yeah.
I think I developed that like with my friendships, like if they were like in a bind or something like that, I'm like coming to their rescue, bro. What do you need? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, like my cousins, hey man, like you need a few dollars here and there, you know what I'm saying? Like you kind of messed up,
Yeah.
you know? And so like I think over time I was just saving people and trying to save it because it made me feel good,
Yeah.
right? Um, but it wasn't healthy. Like, you
Right.
know, like I didn't set a foundation or a boundary, say, okay, like I'm not gonna do this or like don't call me for this or like it was just like I'm just pretty much setting myself up for failure, you know, at the time. You know, 'cause I didn't understand it. I didn't
Absolutely.
understand boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. The lack of understanding of boundaries for both you and I. And then again, this attack on an identity. But what is an identity? Right? It's a validation of an existence.
Yeah.
So this is how I'm introducing, revealing myself to the world. This is how I'm telling the world to interact with me,
Yeah.
right? This is an identity. And yeah, and when that's not needed in that way, it creates conflict, right? And then as the pathology grows, it creates crisis, internal crisis, right?
Hmm.
And again, that's a thing that can become very dangerous, right? And then also with people, because people manipulate that,
Hmm.
right? But I want to be careful because when I say manipulate, like it has a negative connotation, like it's human nature to manipulate, right?
Hmm.
Like Darwin, like self preservation is the first law of nature,
Yeah.
human nature,
Yeah.
right? We manipulate things. An alchemist will take metal and manipulate it and turn it into gold, right? So manipulation is a good thing as well as a bad,
Hmm.
right? So it's a part of our nature, right? But you know, when we don't carefully curate our spheres of influence or our circles of five, right? And then we don't establish healthy boundaries to be able to address trauma and ultimately our traumatizing influencers in a healthy fashion, of course, then that level of manipulation can exacerbate one's pathology, a sickness, a mental sickness.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So it's crazy. And then you brought up Savior's complex. I wanted to mention that because and I want to go back because you said earlier now is a perfect time to bring up or reintroduce the fact that you did grow up in a domestic violence situation. But before I reference Savior's ideation or Savior's complex, the ideation of a Savior's complex, I want to shout out the young brother Justice Bradley because last episode is when we first introduced the concept of the Savior's complex and we provided that definition. And for today's purposes, again, the definition of the Savior's complex is an overwhelming desire for one to come to the aid of another person and satisfy their needs, even at the expense of my own needs, my own happiness, so on and so forth, which creates critical imbalances within the constructs of relationships. So the domestic violence situation, is that where you think you created the ideation of the Savior's complex?
Absolutely. I think over time as I got older, so before I think because I was smaller, like I couldn't really like save my mom. But
Right.
as time went on, I'm like, man, like this man ain't about to keep, you know what I'm saying, like disrespecting my mom, and I feel like he disrespecting me too. You know, so I'm like, man, I'm gonna do something about it, and I'm gonna make sure that I protect my mom at all costs, even if that means that I have to die for that. And so, like, I was sleeping like knives under my pillow, you know, like, but then what ended up happening is because like my mom grew like she got three sisters. So what ended up happening as time went on, like they would have significant others that would try to do something to them, and I went to their rescue as well. So I'm like, man, I'm about to die. I'm about to die behind like my aunts and my mom. You know what I'm saying? Because like, you know, I'm kind of putting myself in the forefront. They didn't have brothers, so I was the oldest grandchild. So I'm kind of putting myself in a situation where I feel like I'm protecting them. You know, I'm coming to their rescue every single time. And so like that definitely created like a created savior's remorse. Or is it remorse?
Savior's complex.
Savior's complex. Yeah.
But I would imagine also a little bit more confusion, which exacerbated the resentment that you talked about earlier. Because now you're in a situation where I got to protect my moms, but you also beating me in the head about the type of man that you want me to be, but I'm protecting you from men that are less than what you're trying to make me be.
Yeah.
So talk about that confusion and ultimate resentment.
Yeah, man. Like, so I think I think it was 2008 when my mom got a divorce. Or 2000, yeah, 2008 when my mom got a divorce. But the year before that, like her ex-husband actually got into a car accident
Mm,
and she cried. Like she literally like cried about it. Like, but he just walked away scot-free. No, like nothing wrong with him. But like I say all that to say I was pissed off. I'm like, man, this motherfucker should have died. Like, I was just like really like emotional about that because I'm like, for you to sit there and cry, but for me to protect you from him, and you're worried about him more than you worry about me, but you're laying the expectation out on for me to be this perfect guy. Like, it made me feel some type of way, bro. Like, it really did. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, mom, like I sat down with him, like, man, like mom, like I really I think I have some resentment towards you for, the expectation that you set on me, but then you letting this man kind of do whatever and he has no expectation. So I that was communicated. I think like as time went on, me and my mom, our relationship was more of trauma bonding.
mm,
Um So she felt like we was close, and I kind of felt like that too. Like, oh, like we're close. But then when I kind of sat back and really thought about it, I'm like, well, we were trauma bonding over this domestic violence relationship, and it really wasn't like a mom son real relationship. It was more like, hey, like I'm your protector,
right,
right? Like, and so like I think I had some resentment because I couldn't really be a kid.
right.
Like in those moments, I'm like, man, I can't even be a kid. I can't even be your son. I got to be your protector. And that was communicated to her too. Like, I'm always being your protector. Like, I want to be your son. Like, I just want to go outside and play and not have to think about if I when I come back home, like after school, are you gonna be dead? Are you gonna be cut up? Because he would make like certain like gestures like that. A certain he would just do certain things to kind of make it seem like he was going to kill her one day and
Right.
so I'm like, man, like in my mind at school I couldn't even focus on my work even though I think I was a average student. I couldn't focus on my work. I played basketball for an outlet, but like it was like, man, I got to hurry up and get home because I got to make sure that my mom is safe. And that kind of play I think that kind of played into like my anxiety as well. So yeah, man, it was a level of resentment that cause, and I think it may still play a huge part in my life now.
It's interesting that you say that because I think a lot of brothers have that 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 strong adoration for mom, right? But also the type of resentment that you describe. But it's interesting again because see, the world's okay. So now we got to talk about mama's boys, right?
Hmm.
But I think we need to draw some very important distinctions, right? Because when you say mama's boys, right, like and immediately what comes to mind, like is a I don't even want to say a portrait, but an idea in your mind of an effeminate man that depends heavily upon mommy,
Hmm.
right? But nothing about you is feminine. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Your adoration and resentment, right? And which ultimately, because the devotion, right, it's like a mathematical equation, right? It's adoration and resentment, but it's also equal in a confused level of devotion, right? Where I'm taking on more things than I really should be taking on. And it's also creating rifts in other relationships in my life, most notably now marriage, right?
Yeah.
But again, we can confuse that, and that could ultimately become a trigger. Yo, you a mama's boy, but again, nothing about you is effeminate.
Hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But when we look at your upbringing and this level of trauma, this level of crisis, right, which produced that relationship, right, which produces now ultimately your experience. So now I feel like it's time to introduce a new term. See, because this is epigenetic influences, the environment influencing the gene, right?
Hmm.
And we always talk about epigenetic influences. But now we got to introduce the term phenomenological influencing factors. But what is a phenomenological influencing factor? When you break it down, the root of it is a phenomenon, right? So phenomenological is the science of studying phenomena that occur in instances that occur. But here's the key: that are distinctly different from the state of being, the natural state of being, right? So these phenomenological influencing factors that occur produces something that's vastly different from what your true nature is. And it's so dope to have these conversations because the more and more that we do like this, it's going to become very easy to see the similarities that a lot of us men have in our upbringings and ultimately the trauma that it produces. And don't get me wrong, it's responsibility and accountability. We're all responsible for doing our own work. But there's a system that produces this phenomenological influencing factor that's designed to produce what you and I are discussing now,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So to attack this or to counteract this or to counterattack this, it has to be a multiple pronged offense, effort rather. But in order to do that, we have to define the monster as what it is at the various stages that it is. You feel me?
Okay.
Shifting gears again a bit. You and your wife met in high school,
Yeah.
had this great emotional attachment. You broke up in college. You had some surface level of relationships outside of your wife.
Hmm.
Um, Codependency you felt with your wife prevented some of those relationships from going beyond surface level, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I, you know, again, like me and my wife met in high school, and like I think we met at a time where like I needed her. You know, she needed me too. But I think we like she was just my person, right? At the end of the day, and I think as time went on, like when we did break up, and I did have relationships with these other women, it really got nowhere. Like, and I was always like, but it was because like I didn't let my vulnerability seep into those relationships either. And I think because when me and my wife broke up, I was just so like heartbroken about it, and I was like, I feel like I was at a vulnerable state that it was just hard for me to open that vulnerable state back up again. Um, and so like that's where my relationships with these other women stood. Like, hey, like if they wanted to walk away, I didn't care. Like I didn't care because I was just so heartbroken about my wife. Um, and so you know I think that's where that's just what it was. Like, but I think it was just a level of vulnerability though. Like I just didn't want to be vulnerable with anybody else. You know, I had already trusted, my wife with all of the information that I gave her, and I didn't want to be vulnerable with anybody else again like that. Like vulnerable with my mom and my family, or the women in my family, and so like I'm like, man, I just can't can't be vulnerable to everybody. I mean, I think ultimately that's where that stemmed from. Hey, like you know I'm not gonna say like taken advantage of, but I think at a time in my life, like I probably was a pushover, and so like in order to like not feel that way, I think that's the reason why like my relationship with other women were surface level.
Just out of curiosity, did any or all of these subsequent women demonstrate a need for you juxtaposed with the lack of need that your wife didn't have for you?
Yeah,
So that's good because it seems as if then, now you were able to consciously draw a distinction between the two.
yeah,
And it seemed like you wanted more of this healthy expression, which ultimately led you back to your wife,
yeah.
which I think is super dope. Um, Now, so then you and your wife get married, and then you guys both, like you mentioned earlier, go to individual therapy. But I want to talk a bit about, or I want you to talk about how you and your wife developed the safe haven.
Okay. So it's kind of, we got married in 2019. Um, and so like, you know, set our vows, everything like that. But I think we just like we understood what each other needed, right? Like we did the work. We're still doing the work. Like I would get mad, she would get mad, but like it was, I think, yeah. I mean, she would get mad, I would get mad, and I think like we would kind of like sit with our emotions and then like come to the table and be like, hey, like what's really going on? So that's what we do now. Like, hey, what's really going on with you? Like you said this, I really didn't like the way you said it. Like what's that about? Right? Like, or you did this, I really didn't like the way you did that. What is that about? Or having those hard conversations to be like, hey, I'm starting to feel this way. Like I'm starting to feel like, you, maybe don't pay attention to me enough, or like you're paying attention. Like we got a new baby, right? So you're paying attention to the baby more than me. Like I'm allowed to say, hey, like I feel like, man, we need to have a date night or we need to do something, like, or she's able to feel like, hey, I feel like you just been going to the gym a little too much. Like and so over time, like I think how we develop that safe haven though, that communication is first off, we went to marriage counseling and then we went to our individual counselors. But our individual counselors were going to hold us accountable about the things that we were feeling. And we
Right.
were able to, and they, we were able to like come to the table to be like, hey, like, I'm okay to, I'm allowed to say this, or like, I'm allowed to feel this way. Right. And so I think a lot of times I just see like in other relationships or other marriages where people are not allowed to like really like say how they feel. They kind of they shut down or they don't say anything or they just kind of like sweep things under the rug and let things kind of like happen the way they're gonna happen. I think my wife is very vocal, so she's not letting things just happen the way they gonna happen. She's gonna come to me every single time and be like, "Hey, like, no matter how you feeling, no matter how I'm feeling, like this is what it is." And it makes me accountable for my feelings and what I'm, what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. And so she kind of gives me that space, and I give her the same space sometimes.
No, that's super dope. Um, and dope that you can acknowledge that too, man. How did or how does your mom respond to this new boundary enforcement?
Um, that's a good question, Saquon. I wish you wouldn't ask me ask me that question. But but my mom, I think she responds in a I think she's still getting used to the fact that I'm married, the fact that hey, like I got my own family, right? Um, I don't think she's quite there yet.
Hmm.
But the conversations are being had, hey, like, I got my own family to take care of. You got your husband, and hey, like this is the boundary that we set. Um, it's a work in progress though, but I think we're getting there. We're getting there. Like she's starting to respond the way I want her to respond. But it's still a work in progress. So
I think that's great. I think it's great for you that you're still constantly reinforcing that boundary.
yeah.
And I think it goes all the way back to the beginning in the introduction where I mentioned that, boundary reinforcement for the protection and nurturing of relationships. Both or all parties have to be willing participants,
Yeah.
right? And then the beautiful thing about it is, see, you and your wife are doing the work. And when you do the work, obviously you heal, you grow, you increase your level of awareness, but it becomes easy to spot and identify people who aren't doing the work,
Hmm.
right? And then you hold them accountable accordingly, right? So I think that that's a beautiful thing. Now, when you and your wife split initially, you felt that, according to you, you were in mama's boy mode because, like you said earlier, you grew up with a lot of women.
Hmm.
And you mentioned your granddad earlier, but I want to provide a segment for you to talk about how influential your granddad was because I can tell that, emotionally he's a huge influence in your life. So I'd like for you to get that off. You said that he was there to provide balance, but he was a stern man. He was a provider.
Yeah.
Passed away at 67 in 2020.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
And my grandfather, man, I think he grew up in a town where like there were it. I think he grew up in a town where he was taught to like just provide for his family, right? So he set the foundation for me and my younger cousins, like the guy cousins or whatever. Great guy, funny, you know, leader. I would say a leader, very stern though, like very like if you got on his bad side, it was over with. But I think he just loved his grandchildren too. Like and he taught me so many different things about being a man and you know providing for your family and like making sure your money's right. Like he taught me all these things. Um and you could tell in his life that he was living those. But I think too, and I kind of mentioned this, I don't think he didn't teach me how to be a husband. He was a husband, but I he just wasn't that great of a husband, man. Like I think I can acknowledge that. Like great grandfather, not so great husband. And I think a lot of men in my family that I seen, they just weren't great husbands. So I didn't really have like a solid foundation of what a husband would be. Um, and so yeah, like I said, great dude. You know, taught me a lot, loved me. And I loved him. And but like my grandmother always say, man, like every time I bring him up, and he cheated every year. He cheated every year of our marriage. I think we married like 40 years, but cheated every year of the marriage. I didn't see that. I only seen the last part when they got divorced, but I didn't see when he was doing all that stuff. So I think my grandparents did a good job of like hiding that from us, so that we didn't have a that I didn't have like a skewed perspective or vision of my grandfather and what he really was. But I think from my perspective, as a grandchild, I think he was a great guy.
I think that's amazing. You, mental health and doing what we do now, man. I mentioned on previous episodes, this has come to be one of my passions, right? Another one of my passions, like I'm a history buff. Like I love all things history, right? So I study history. And I mentioned earlier phenomenological influencing factors, right?
Mhm.
Epigenetic influences, environment influencing the gene or learned behaviors, right? So it's like when you study history, you gotta study the times in which people lived, right? And if you really want to study it, you gotta immerse yourself in that time. It's like time travel, for lack of a better term, right? Not to get spooky, right? You can't get in the machine and time travel, right? But if I want to study the 50s or the 60s, right,
Mhm.
then I can. get literature about that time frame, right? Like I can use the internet and I can pull up YouTube and I can listen to certain speeches from certain prominent people so that I can understand what was prominent in those times. I can watch shows from that time, right?
Hmm.
So I can immerse myself in that environment, right? And then once I begin to conceptualize that, I can time travel, meaning I can take my emotions with me and I can imagine what scenarios would be like if I lived in this time. And just like the movie Inception, if I do that well enough, my subconscious will literally populate that time. So I can imagine what it's like to be driving down a dirt road. I can close my eyes and I can take my emotions with me. And I can say, yo, I'm down this dirt road. What would it be like? And I'm driving and it's wooded and I see a burning black man hanging from a tree. What that do to me?
Hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So understanding what these phenomenological influencing factors are when you attach them to a specific time, you can get a sense of who your grandfather was. And this is not to discredit what your grandmother experienced, right? Because women have an equally legitimate plight in this as well. And it's always responsibility and accountability, right? But
Hmm.
if your grandfather was 67 and he died at 2020, that puts his birth at around about 1953. My math is shitty. I think that's right. Michelle? 1953, right? Yes. Okay. Good. So we got to understand those times, right? And then
Yeah.
10 and then adolescence. So that puts you around about the 53 to the 68, 63 to the 68 time frame.
Hmm.
But we got to understand what those times were.
Yeah.
See, the supervisor talked to a black man like shit back then. You understand?
Hmm.
The police officer talked to a black man like shit. Blank the bank teller. Everybody talked to a black man like shit. You ever seen the movie Fences
Yes.
with Denzel
Yeah.
Washington? And then the one before that with James Earl Jones, right? And you remember the speech, the passionate speech that he had with his son. Son, I ain't got to like you. It's my, you understand? See,
Yeah.
those were learned behaviors. He was talking to his son that way because that was an epigenetic influencing factor or a phenomenological influencing factor. See, that message conveyed was conveyed with a skewed sense of love. You understand?
Hmm.
To provide protection in an unstable time for Black people, right?
Hmm.
So when we talking about emotional love, emotional security, it was survival then. You understand?
Yeah.
You had to survive, right? So relationships, they thrived in a certain type of way. But the way that we're now able to have the freedom to learn about emotional intelligence and be successful, and then you be in the aerospace space and then go get your master's degree to become a mental health expert. You understand what I'm saying? And then you and your wife go to therapy. See, this is the sacrifice that they made. You understand what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And then around about that time, another phenomenological influence, in fact. So you had the black exploitation movies. So you got to understand, women have an equal plight in this, and we're not discrediting that. But you got to understand what that type of environment produces in a testosterone man and how that beats you down, right? And everywhere you go, you're belittled,
Hmm.
right? And you express that rage and frustration, right? And you're arguing with your wife and you're doing all it, and it doesn't make it right. Women have an equally legitimate plight. I want to be clear in expressing that, right?
Hmm.
So then, we overindulge in the drugs and the alcohol because we want to do anything that we can to escape the reality of our environment. And then we also look for ways that we can express ourselves in full fledged testosterone. And typically in those times, which has become exacerbated now as a result of a learned behavior from these experiences, you understand? We did that with our sexual prowess, right?
Yeah.
And this is what made us promiscuous. So again, it's responsibility and accountability. All right. But this was a systematic design to produce these results. And we have to understand that. Bro, I think this was a super dope conversation, man. And I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and express everything that you've expressed. Again, this is a safe space. I hope you got everything off your chest that you needed to.
Yes, sir.
I look forward to doing it again, providing you're willing. You got anything or anyone you want to shout out?
Shout out to my family. Shout out to my wife, Jasmine. Shout out to my daughter, Autumn. Yeah. Now shout out to my therapist, D. Anthony Harris, man. He's a great therapist. Interlink Counseling, one of the greatest counseling facilities out there. Yeah, so
My man,
shout out to you as well.
my guy.
Yeah. Shout out to you, man. So
Shout out to you too, young blood. Boundaries. By definition, again, is a demarcation, a conceptualized limit that we impose for the protection and nurturing of our relationships that defines what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Our sphere of influences, our circle of five, the people most closest to us that we allow to influence us. A lot of us still have one or more of their traumatizing influencers in their circles of five. So they're unbeknowingly being influenced and still subjected to trauma in a lot of ways. Boundaries is the prerequisite, along with undergoing your mental health journey, to writing that. Listen, if you found value here, and it's my sincere hope that you did, then please comment, like, subscribe, follow the You versus You podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And keep checking your boy out, and we'll keep busting this thing down. Peace.
You versus you, let's clear our heads of it. I'm so good now, I feel good now. The baggage put down, just let me live. Just let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.